Hello, everybody. Welcome to the season recap edition of Real Hawk Talk. This is Brian Nemhauser, at Hawk Blogger on Twitter, and looking forward to kind of looking back at the season that was the 2020 wackadoo season. That officially, as I said before the season started, if the Seahawks do not win the Super Bowl, this season has an absolute asterisk on it. Doesn't really count. Whoever wins it, it's a half accomplishment. If the Seahawks had won it, it would have been legitimate, but that didn't happen. So this season really doesn't count. We'll talk about all that and more. We're going to have Dayna O'Gorman, at Dayna OG, host for us tonight, master of ceremonies for this recap episode. We are bringing you all 5 of the Real Hawk Talk crew. And Dayna, why don't you take it from there?
Well, here's the deal. When you asked me to host tonight, I couldn't decide if you were kidding or not. And then I thought to myself, I wonder if they know what they've gotten into. Because, as you know, I'm considered the positive one. I'm considered the nice one. I'm the one, Pollyanna, I think you guys like to call me. But here's the deal. If I get to ask the questions, then they might be positive only answers. But no, I'm excited. I'm actually excited to talk about this season. Of course, I don't have quite the doom and gloom that you guys have about it. And I actually really enjoyed Russ's presser today. So I think we'll talk about that a little bit too. But I want to first, before we get into like a season recap, I kind of wanted to talk to you guys now that the dust has settled a little bit. Now that, the idea of Schotty not being in Seattle anymore has settled. Is your opinions any different than your initial reaction? Because we got on and we talked about our first reactions to that. A lot of us were surprised, some of us weren't. But now that the dust is kind of settled, have any of your feelings changed at all? And if not, I'll move right on. But I just thought that maybe after a couple of days, things might feel a little different.
I have slowly gotten more positive about them finding a better replacement for him. There's initially a lot of fear in the back of my mind that, with Pete's comments that they want to return to running the ball, often effectively, blah, 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 but they have an opportunity to bring in somebody from the outside with a real fresh perspective here, even if it's, conducive to Pete's philosophy, new ideas, new voice. I think those can be positive things. So, I'm scared to say this, but I'm cautiously hopeful about this.
Okay. Anybody else?
I was hopeful when it happened. Still hopeful.
So same opinions. Jeff, Nathan, same. Feel the same about it? No different? Just kind of meh? Nobody?
Yeah, I'm the same. I haven't changed a lot on this. I'm still a little bit in shock, but no new thoughts on it, really.
One of the things I really respect about Nathan, and there are a number of things that I respect about Nathan, but one of the things I like best, we don't always agree on a
number
lot
of things.
There are a number of things. He's very tall. I respect that about him. He looks much more like a Viking than I ever will. I respect that about him as well. But he is steady. Like, he does not change his opinion, even in the face of new information that makes his opinion seem very wrong. He's very steady. I think that's a good thing about Nathan. I like that.
I change my opinions in the face of new information, but yes, I do. I am steady.
No, I was pulling your leg, but I do respect that about you. You're not easily swayed like other people on this panel. Let me just put it that way.
What are you talking about?
Who could that be?
Who could you be talking about?
I'm one of them. Hey, I'm an emotional dude. So
Nathan's definitely the steadiest. He's like the left tackle of the show.
Actually, what are you talking about? Nathan absolutely hates data. He hates analytics. And you want to know why? I did a 100 visit to Matador Science Survey with nacho toppings on the side. It was a full scientific discovery, a full scientific process. The data spoke for itself. And guess who rejected the results? Guess who rejected the results? That data nerd in the bottom right-hand corner.
I'm looking forward to reading your research paper on that. I haven't actually. You keep forgetting to share the link and the data on that, but
it's on Parler. I'm just kidding.
Oh my. Okay, Jeff, you did not get a chance to answer the question. Did you? I know that you watched.
That was a much more exciting answer than I would have.
Okay, awesome. Good.
I'll say
All
this.
right.
Say this.
Uh-huh.
We did the show the other night. I was very into the idea that he quit. I don't think he quit anymore.
Okay. What changed that? Because you were in my boat, and then
I think
left
Pete
it.
fired him. Hearing Pete and then Russell, I think Pete fired him.
After listening to Russ's presser today, I can
Russ
see that.
seemed shocked.
Yeah, he seemed bummed.
Yeah, so I think Pete fired him.
Yeah. And now,
Well, I mean, you don't have to get all back into that, but
yeah,
it seems like it's exactly as reported. Pete
Yeah.
went in there. They had a conversation. Pete was clear about what he expected for next year. Shotty was like, "That's not what I'm expecting for next year." Pete's like, "Yeah, but that's what I'm expecting for next year." And they're like, "Okay," and they left each other. Like, I mean, it was a mutual split. I don't know that it has to be a firing or a quit. I think it was like, yeah, this isn't going to work.
My initial reaction was more like Shotty's like, "I'm out. This is not."
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like that's probably
That was my initial reaction after hearing Pete talk and hearing the Seahawks use that term, philosophical difference. But now it's kind of come to head exactly what you said.
Dayna, before we got on, Evan was going to ask us something about.
I was just about to say that.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. Now, so before we get into the season, Evan, you said you had a burning question for us that you just had to get off your chest.
So this is very topic related, very closely topic related. As all old people on this show, and I'm not, that's not a derogatory term. It's just a reflection of reality. So, as old people, do you ever wake up and things just start to like hurt? Like your leg hurts, your back hurts, shit just starts hurting, and there's like no logical reason for it. Are you guys hurt? Like, do you guys experience that?
Well, my foot is still in a cast, so yeah, every day.
I woke up with like crazy back pain, so I just wanted to ask my fellow experienced old people if that's the case. With
I'd say when you turn 30, one of the things you'll notice is you'll be a lot more tired.
Oh, buddy, I'm already there.
I know, and
He's
things
like
will start
60.
hurting. Which is why Pete annoys me, because he's like 70 years old. He's running up the stairs. I can barely fucking get off the couch. I'm like half his age.
Pete is insanely athletic.
I'm like tired and hurt all the time. It's like I don't know what the hell's going on.
So I know that was a really, really useful slot of show space. So we can continue.
Well, I just want to offer that one of the ways that you'll find to help avoid those aches and pains, there's two things actually. One is you wear copper in everything. Copper socks, copper like little armbands, like everything's copper. And then the other thing you do is you wear full zip hoodies. And it makes you feel really cozy, and you don't have to pull it over your head, so you don't get those like shoulder popping out of the joint. It's a huge part of keeping yourself healthy and happy as you get older.
It's true. I'm sorry. Moving on. Poor Evan. Poor Evan. All right, you guys, let's go ahead and dive into the season a little bit. Kind of what Brian said at the beginning, that we kept saying, oh, the season will have an asterisk this season. It's not that big of a deal. It is a big deal. It's still a season. They managed to play the full season with a few little blips, for lack of a better word. And so I want kind of an idea, and you can give it a grade if you want to. I'm not really into grading seasons because, I just don't think it's that big of a deal. But, your overall view, thumbs up, thumbs down on the season. Okay. But I give you this before we go to Nathan, because I'm going to go to Nathan first.
Oh boy.
You cannot pinpoint one thing and say it ruined the whole season. I want you guys to look at the entire season overall, including the beginning of the season. So Nathan, I'm going to start with you because I figure we're going to have to build ourselves back up after that.
All right, so are we just doing a quick thumbs up or thumbs down, or
Yeah, just kind of a
or should
real
we do a
quick,
letter grade?
you can if you want to. You can give it a letter grade if you want to. I know not everybody's in that. You can give it thumbs up and down, but just kind of a general summary of how you felt about the season.
I mean, it was a little bit of a roller coaster for me. I mean, it started off really awesome. It was a lot of fun. And then they just got stuck and couldn't fix themselves. And then they capped it off with a disappointing playoff loss. So, I mean, between the recency bias and, the playoffs kind of being the point of the whole thing, I think this was and all the questions that it's opened up about Russ and the future, with him and how this offense can work going forward. To me, this is like a C- type year. It's slightly disappointing.
Wow. Okay. All right, Jeff, you were nodding your head. You agree with him?
Yeah, it's funny you asked this question. I'm a thumbs down. And I was just talking to a friend of mine, and we were kind of going over like big picture context, like how would you grade a bunch of these teams in terms of how they progress this year? Like someone like the Chargers, for example, like we gave them like an 8 because they found their quarterback of the future. For them, that's the most important priority.
Huge. Mm-hmm.
For the Seahawks, from where they are, their biggest priority was to become a contender. And in that regard, for the first half of the year, that looked to be true. But what happened, and now we're left with questions about the quarterback. I'm like Nathan. I'm close to a C- because they lost in the first round. They lost the home game. They lost to a quarterback who couldn't throw a spiral, and they don't look close. Their goal this year was to turn to a contender. They didn't win a playoff game. So to me, that's a C-.
Okay. Brian, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I like that we're doing letter grades because, I don't think it's a pass-fail class in some regards, and thumbs up, thumbs down. If it was just those things, I would say fail and thumbs down overall. But for letter grade, for me, it's more a B- than a C-. Like I look at it, and how long have we wanted to see a heavy pass on early down offense and see what Russell would look like in that? And we got to see that. And we saw DK break the record for, receiving yards in a season. And we saw Tyler break the record for receptions in a season. And we have two receivers go over 1,000 yards for the first time since, what was it, Blades and Galloway or something like that. And I think, the offensive line took a step forward, and Brandon Shell came out of nowhere to look like someone who could be part of this team for a little while and stabilize the line. And Damian Lewis looks like he can be part of that. And defensive tackle, defensive line wise, like Alton Robinson looks like he could help. And Carlos Dunlap looks like he can help. And like, there's a lot of things that Jordan Brooks looks like he's going to be able to. So like, I look at a season not just with the final result, but like, did we step forward, overall? And I think we did. I think the team did. No way you can consider it a successful season for the reasons we've talked about in the past, but there's a lot to like about what we saw this year. And I think the thing that maybe I feel most positive about, besides the personnel, is while everyone has been fighting like crazy about the offense and Pete versus Russ and how they're going to approach the offense, I've been sitting here for 5 years being like, this defense sucks. And it's getting worse. This was the first year since I think 2015 or 14, I can't remember exactly. I have it somewhere, that they actually allowed less points than the year before. So like, and they're ranked higher than they were the year before. So like, I see the defense has turned a corner, and I see it can get better next year. And that gives me hope that they have something foundationally that they can build off of. And they still have Russell Wilson, who's one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, and all those other players I mentioned. So it's not an F season, but I understand why people are disappointed. It could have been a lot better than it was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm probably in the middle of Jeff, Nathan, and Brian. I'd probably go a C or a C+. Obviously, the result of losing in the wild card round is extremely disappointing. But like Brian said, I do think there's a couple of reasons to reflect on this team and be optimistic and positive about them. Number one, I would say, like Brian said, the defense really turned a corner. What we saw from them in the final 8 weeks of the year was nothing short of a completely stunning turnaround. And I think them moving forward, they're probably the most confidence inspiring part of the team, frankly. They're not really lose. What was that?
What a good thing.
Yeah, and they're not losing a ton of talent like year over year in free agency this next year. Yeah, Shaquille Griffin, KJ Wright are kind of the two big names there, but outside of that, everybody's locked in for next year. So this defense, I don't think it's unrealistic to expect them to get a lot better. The second point I'll just say is like, I don't think this team lacks talent. Like this team has the talent on both sides of the ball, on special teams. The talent is there to win a Super Bowl, actually, in my opinion. Now it just comes down to execution, being consistent, and I think getting better coaching. So I think, we've complained about this team in years past saying, the pass rush is garbage, which it was, last year and the year before. Like they have definitely had clear talent issues in years past. But moving forward, this is a talented football team. There's no disputing that on both sides of the football. So, I'm horrifically disappointed that they lost in the wild card round. Obviously, I think that's a failure in terms of that microscopic lens. But, if they had won in the wild card round and even lost in the divisional round, I think my answer would have been much higher, like a B plus. So I think it's important from my frame of reference, I'm putting a lot of, focus on that wild card game when in reality, it doesn't really inform the future that much.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Oh, go ahead.
Can I have one more thing, Dayna?
Sure.
So one of the other pieces that I think's fascinating is if this had been a season that ended with the offense going on that streak, that 9-game streak, where if they had gone and all of a sudden were scoring 35 points a game, even maybe keeping up what they did at the beginning of the season or whatever, flip the season around. They started off really bad and they finished really strong. And they lost in the playoffs because the defense was just awful and gave up 40 points. I think a lot of people might have felt in some ways more positive because of like being offensive oriented. But I would look at that and be like, man, the defense it's really hard to build a defense. And like, if you're just going to keep having year after year, a shit defense, doesn't matter how good your offense is going to be. So to me, the fact is that they have made progress in the harder area to build, and they've got the talent on offense. So I feel like they're just missing a good OC potentially. And that's just a lot smaller of a problem to solve, generally speaking, than if they had a whole defense that they needed to build.
And I agree with that, especially because of who the quarterback is. So, we look at that and we're like, because you guys know I'm a defense lover. I'll take a good defense any day over a good offense. But, when you have a fantastic defense, but you have Jared Goff or some of those other quarterbacks you cannot trust or cannot rely on, that's a much bigger hurdle to get over, in my opinion. But if you have a good defense and a quarterback you normally can trust, he just had a bad half of season. And literally, guys, that's what this was, half a season, right? Then you trust that they can fix that quicker. And so that to me gives me a lot of optimism about this team, especially because I like defense so much. But overall, I agree with just about everything you guys said. I would give this team like a middle B to a B minus also, just because you saw in the offseason them really attacking the need. And then when they didn't get there far enough, they went and got done left. They were addressing what they needed to address at the time. I just don't think that they knew they needed to address the offense at the time. So now hopefully they'll come back and get that fixed. But I will never, ever look at a 12-win season as a bad thing. Now I get it, because to me, this is a little different 12-win season than the Steelers 11 wins, right? Like, I mean, we get that, right? That whole team.
I don't know. I think it's
very terrible. No, Jeff, it is. It is. I promise.
They had remarkably similar seasons.
No, that is not allowed in this is my forum. We don't say nice. No, I'm just kidding.
Yes,
no, Dayna. I get what you're saying. I get it. No, I get it. I totally get it. It just hurts me that anyone would compare the Seattle Seahawks and the Steelers. But I think
the Steelers. I'm sorry. Continue.
Thank you, Evan. Thank you.
Fucking hate that team.
Yeah. So, but I don't know. I just feel like that Seattle has a smaller hill to climb than, let's say, the Steelers do.
No, long term, they are one of the most fucked teams in the NFL. If you study cap and you study Evan can tell you, he's got a $40 million cap hit.
Yeah.
The
42
reason I'm
next
still, the
For a
reason I
40-year-old
guess I
quarterback.
think my grade and Nathan's grade might be similar is for the first time in the last 2 years when they lost in the playoffs, it was pretty easy to identify what the issues were. That the defense wasn't good enough, the coaching was too conservative, and if Russell was incredible in both those games, this is the first time I'm left with questions about the quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that is a huge, huge story. They fired their offensive coordinator. There are questions about what this offense is. To me, it's not as simple as you bring everyone back and everything's fine. To me, there's questions that need to be fixed. And that dictated my grade more than anything else. Because it's the first time I've really had those questions.
It's fair.
Yeah, because I don't know if you can really do the hypothetical of, well, if you flip the season and the offense had ended on a strong note, because you're just in such a different spot then. If the offense ends in a strong note and, they had been like slowly ramping up the passing instead of ramping down the passing, then Shoddy's not getting fired and you're not having Pete talking about, we're not arguing about how important the run is again and all that kind of stuff. So like, yeah, if the offense was stronger at the end of the year, I mean, for me, there's priors and stuff involved there that would make me feel better about it. But also, I think the team just is in a fundamentally different spot if the offense is ascending instead of cratering, right, in the second half of the year.
I just want to make sure I understand those. So are you saying that you think the team would be in a better position there? You'd feel more confident about their ability to put a defense together? Or what?
I just mean like you don't have all of these questions that you have about the offense right now, right?
Sure.
If the offense is playing in the second half the way it played in the first half, you feel good about the offense. You feel good about the game plan going forward. You feel much better about Pete having allowed the offense to open up in that way, right? And instead, because it is reversed, it's not just that, the offense was bad at the end and we like offense. It's they fired their offensive coordinator and there's questions about Russ and Pete's now talking about how they need to get back to running more. And so it's not, and a lot of that is like, I mean, for a lot of people, Pete saying getting back to running is a good thing for them, right? But like for me, obviously, that's concerning. And so that is, I think, a big part. It's not just about, I love offense, right? Or, I love Russ or something like that. I think if you put the season and you flip it, it's just a very, very, very different discussion. And it's not just because of when one side of the ball was playing better.
Yeah, the part about that makes a lot of sense to me is if you flip it, what it means is you figured out how to optimize your most valuable asset. I get that.
Against those opponents too.
And I think that what we're faced with now is still questions about how to get the most out of Russell Wilson.
Yep. Exactly.
And there's debates about that, and I'm sure we'll talk about that, Dana. But I get that, yeah. But I think, reasonably speaking, I think that the Seahawks are in better position to build more success offensively than they would have been if they had had another disastrous defensive season.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing I think we should clarify too, like I think when we're giving these grades, we're giving them relative to the Seahawks, right? Not relative to the league. So like a C is
for sure.
Right. A C is what you expected the Seahawks to do this year, right? Obviously, if we're talking about like how good of a season did Seahawks have relative to the NFL, I'm more like a B or a B plus, right?
Exactly. Because you can make an argument, for example, using the same grading that like the Jaguars could get an A because they've set up to get their quarterback.
Yeah, exactly.
This team had a 2-14 season, you'd say F times 1,000, but context is really important.
Yeah, I think that is because a lot of people, like I've told you guys, I send you guys the tweets that people send me. They're like, "Oh my God, you guys have got to quit complaining." Yes, we understand that this is a good team. We get that. We just have expectations, some higher than others. We have expectations that from this team because they're so good. And I think that's a really good clarification. So I'm glad
you sound like me right now. Are you doing okay?
No, I don't
ever sound like was that Evan Hill talking?
No, it really wasn't.
Every week you guys kind of transform into each other.
No. That is so not true.
It's totally true, Dana.
Dana is so deeply offended by this, and I love it.
Yeah, that's
really not.
I'm sure that we have some people that are really good with like with the computer graphics and the whatnot and the MS Paint and the Adobes and all that good
Stop
stuff.
it. Just stop it right
Somebody
now.
please do a Dayna and Evan face swap for us.
No, please don't.
So we can just
Oh,
see what their
poor
final form
Evan.
is going to be in about
Poor
a year when they
Evan.
merge together completely.
Especially if you can get Evan's face on a full zip hoodie body. I think that would be
Fair
Hey
enough.
Brian, hey Brian, go fuck yourself.
Oh my gosh. All right, let's move on, you guys. All right, let's keep going. So I want, because this is who I am, whether you guys like it or not, I want you guys to tell me your favorite player. Favorite player on offense, favorite player on defense. Not nothing negative, just our favorite player from offense and favorite player from defense, and why. And it doesn't have to be the obvious. I mean, it can be DK because he had a fantastic year. It can be Tyler because, whatever it is, or, heck, it could be Rashad Penny if you wanted because he managed to come back. But tell me why you appreciated what this player did. This is going to kill Nathan.
No. I'm trying to decide which one to pick.
All right, Evan, I'm going to let you go first.
Does Jason Myers,
I knew you were going to say that, which is why I felt you go first.
does Jason Myers count as an offensive player
Absolutely.
because he scores points
That's actually a good answer.
Yeah.
frequently? No, here's the thing. I make jokes about Jason Myers because yes, obviously the contract was an interesting decision, although it was relative to, other NFL contracts, not a big deal, but the dude didn't miss, a field goal this year. And last year was disappointing. So my half serious, half not serious answer is like Jason Myers was a stud this year. And we should feel confident in our kicking situation going forward because Pete loves to kick long field goals. And we need a good kicker for that.
Which team was it, you guys, that went through like 4 kickers this year? Who was that? There was a team that went through like 3 or 4.
Rams went through 3 at least. I know that.
Did they? I couldn't. I thought I was thinking it was an East Coast.
I actually think that's a good answer, Evan. Like he was
I think it's good.
way above expectations this year.
For sure. What about defense, Evan?
Oh, defense. That's a really good question. I'm going to go with Carlos Dunlap. Dunlap was insane this year. Like, I don't know what his final sack number was, but I know like in the 4 weeks, like after we traded for him, he had more sacks than any Seahawks defender from last year did the entire season. So he is somebody obviously who fell out of good graces in Cincy, and John picked him up for a 7th rounder. And, in a player that wasn't even a starter for us, and he's under contract for next year. So a lot of people don't realize that Carlos Dunlap is under contract for next year, and it's like $11 or $12 million. I'd have to check, but like relative on the pass rushing scale, I mean, pass rushers, like top end pass rushers are getting like 25 million a year, 26, 27 million a year. Joey Bosa just got 27.5 per year. So like on the value scale, it's an insanely good situation for the Seahawks.
And he's thrilled to be here, which even makes it more fun. Love that. All right, Nathan, how about you?
Yeah, so I'm just, I guess, answer it as like who do I just like the most? Like who's just the most fun for me?
Sure.
And I offense, it's easy. It's DK, right? He's awesome in like every way, on field, off field, right? He's super cool. The Largent jerseys and all that stuff is awesome. On defense, I think I have to go Dunlap as well. There's a couple honorable mentions there with like a guy like Puna maybe and a couple others, but the impact that Dunlap had and he was awesome this year. So
I'm going to take a little side note. I want your guys' opinion. So I don't know if you guys saw that Jaron Reed posted that he had a great year no matter what additions they made. And it was right after Pete said, that Dunlap was one of the most important additions. I don't know. I thought that was a little dig, but that's just me. Anyway, I thought that was interesting.
He was wrong.
Huh?
I actually did not see that tweet because Jaron Reed.
Well, we made fun of it in our group chat.
But good to know he tweeted
Evan, that doesn't surprise me at all. Okay, Brian, you want to go next?
DK easily for favorite on offense. Love everything about him, including the fact that I think he is just scratching the surface of what he can be, and he just broke the franchise record for yards in the season. I mean, the guy like fumbled a touchdown at the 1-inch line. He dropped all these passes. Like he has so much more that he wasn't targeted by his quarterback enough or by the offensive coordinator, whoever was the reason. Like, he can be so much more, and he was still an all-pro this year. So I love that about him. I love that he gets under opponent's skin. Like, he is legit swag, like, on that team. And it's no, like, there's no posing going on there. And I love that. I think this team needs a little bit more dog in there.
Can I ask you a question on DK, Brian?
I'll decide if I'm going to answer, but just go ahead.
Is DK, relative to his contract and his skill, the most valuable asset the Seahawks have?
Yeah, I think there's no question. Top end receiver is 20 million plus, right? Like,
yeah, 20 even.
Yeah, so, like, and he could be the best overall receiver in the game within a year or two. So yeah, no doubt. Second round pick. I mean, making like $1 million. Crazy. Defense. Defense. I'll go with DJ Reed.
Okay.
Really loved his attitude as well. Not just that he played well, but the guy played physically for his size. He run support. He didn't back down from anybody. Made smart plays on the ball. Filled a huge need, and I think it was a big part of the turnaround. So that would be the guy that stands out for me.
Awesome. Yeah, it's hard to argue with that pickup. That's a good pickup. All right, Jeff.
Okay, those are basically all the answers I could have given. I'm going to take a totally different spin on the question.
Awesome.
And I'm going to give, Dunlap. You guys know how much I love Dunlap. And I'm going to give two guys who played above expectations for me this year. And so they were kind of my favorites. On offense, I'm going to go Dwayne Brandt. And I thought Dwayne, he's such an important guy in the locker room. He really sets the tone. And he came off a down year last year where he got injured at the end. And at his age, everyone was like, well, they need a left tackle in the draft. Why don't they draft a left tackle? Dwayne was as steady as they come. He was a Pro Bowl to all pro level all year. And he really kind of shows how valuable he is in the league, because there's a lot of questions at other spots on their offensive line. To have just a steadying force, especially when they went more up to the passing game. Dwayne played in every game. I thought he was as good and as important as any player. Like, maybe it's recency bias. Like, if you asked me 8 weeks ago, I clearly would have said DK, but his numbers kind of dropped off at the end, and that's probably more of a systemic issue than a DK issue. So I'll hold off on that one for now. And using the same logic, because Dunlap is my guy and Puna is a great answer. Puna really stepped forward this year. I'll go KJ Wright on defense. And KJ is a guy that we were talking about releasing to make room for Clowney. And he was a guy that we thought he's in his 30s. He's old. They drafted a replacement for him. He had to switch positions. He had surgery. By many measures, KJ had his best season as a Seahawk. And he switched positions after Bruce Irvin got injured. And he had to hold the edge. And if you watch that game where they won the division, KJ was a dominant player in this game. And honestly, he might have played his way out of Seattle. He played too well, because now he's talking and leaking in the media he wants his money. But I thought he was awesome this year, playing a new position at his age. He's not the guy in coverage anymore, and they found a way to utilize his strengths. I thought he was great this year.
He really was. You know, I have to say, I think we really dodged a bullet with Clowney. I know that they're, like, at the beginning, everyone wanted him, everyone was all in, but you know, that sort of thing. But that was a huge bullet, and Titans fans are furious. So I'm glad we did that one. I'm going to have to. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
You were so wrong. You were not. You were not, Dayna. You were right. But a lot of us on this pod were dead wrong. So yeah, good on you.
Yeah. You know, I'm going to have to say my favorite on offense is Chris Carson, for sure, without any question.
What a surprise.
No, I only said it to make Nathan make a face. And he did. And thank you.
You didn't even choose the
General is
best.
that this year.
Like push button, Dayna. You know exactly like
Dana has become a pot
put in the
stirrer.
quarter, you get the response. It's great.
I at least
Okay.
expected you to pick like the best Seahawks running back, but
Oh,
mean-
look at you.
Alex
No,
Thomas.
I'm kidding. And I do love the run game. You know, I'd still have Marshawn Lynch in this team if I had anything to say about it. But I know it just drives Nathan crazy. That's why I said it. You know, on offense, this might seem really cheesy to you guys, but I'm still going to pick Russ. I still think that I know he had a bad half a season, but I just think he's so dependable. And I really like his attitude. I know you guys think it's all business answers when he answers, but I really like his attitude. So I'm going to pick Russ. And that's a big step for me because I don't like offense and I really don't like quarterbacks. So that's a big step for me. But on defense, I'm going to have to go Jamal Adams. And I think this is where a lot of us differ. We kind of got into it a little bit during our chat. I think he was worth absolutely everything they gave up for him. And I know that not everyone agrees with me here. Okay. But I think it's funny though, because people, you know, and I say people in your group, because it's not just you guys, you know, bitch and moan about how the Seahawks draft and how they're not good talent evaluators and they go all out and, you know, but then complain when they give up their first round for a proven young talent. I don't get it. I don't get it, but I think he's worth everything. I'm thrilled he's on the team. I love his energy. And it goes back to kind of what Brian was saying about DK, that this team was missing that swag. They were missing that chip. They were missing the loudmouth Richard Sherman on the corner. Like that's how I loved this team. So I'm really glad that he is back there. So, all right. So let's move on. I want to talk about the upcoming free agents, and not free agents from the team, but Seattle. And I want to know from you guys, who do you guys think it's most important for Seattle to re-sign? Now, I know we touched on this a couple of episodes back, but I want to get a little more thought, especially as the way the season ended, now with Shoddy being gone, your guys' thoughts on who you guys think from Seattle is probably the most important. And it can be one or two if you guys really feel that, you know, that strongly about a couple of them. But let's start, Brian, let's start with you this time on who you really feel is important out of the Seattle team. And then we will go out and talk to other teams about other teams for agency.
Do you mind before Brian even answers if I list off just some of the high
please do.
ones?
That'd be great. Yeah.
So these are unrestricted free agents. Shaquille Griffin, David Moore, Brandon Jackson. Actually, no, not Brandon Jackson. I was reading something else. Ethan Posick. Nico Thorpe is an unrestricted free agent.
Oh.
He's kind of somebody under the radar we should think about. Mike Upati, Carlos Hyde, Benson Mayoa, Jacob Hollister, Quentin Dunbar, Bruce Irvin, KJ Wright, and Greg Olson.
Yeah, the only truly valuable starter in that list is KJ Wright. I think you could lose every one of those guys and probably not miss a beat. I think Quentin Dunbar could be the biggest upside value relative to cost, but would not lose a single wink of sleep if he signed elsewhere. There's a bunch of other corners to pluck off the market. So I would go with KJ. Might be hard to keep him, but I think that would be the most valuable for sure.
Okay. Jeff, what about you?
I'm going to go with none of them. I don't think any of those players are worth re-signing unless it's at a bargain deal. I just said KJ was my favorite player on the team. I don't think it's smart to pay two linebackers in this era in terms of team building, in terms of other issues they need to address. Chris Carson is a good running back. I don't think you can pay him. Posick turned into a bit of a pumpkin in the second half of the year. Brian kind of nailed that one. He kind of sucks.
I love how you started calling players pumpkins.
Yeah, it's when they
Cinderella.
Yeah,
It's so funny to me.
Yeah, I don't see one player on that list that I think is that important. I think you can replace guys in free agency, and I think I think all of these guys are the kind of players that you do not pay. You can replace them. I think every single one are replaceable.
Jeff, I want to counter that though. So with KJ specifically, because earlier when we did talk about this a couple of episodes ago, pretty much all of us agreed KJ was a requirement to come back. And I think that my reasoning for that anyway, is the way that KJ and Bobby play together. It's much like the Legion of Boom was. You separated them. They weren't that great on other teams. You had to keep them together. It was the way they played together. And so I worry a little bit of removing that safety net from Bobby and then seeing how that affects the rest of the team. At the same time, I don't think you can pay him top dollar due to his age. I do agree with you there, but that's my only caveat.
I agree with you. And if all things were even and the Seahawks were flush with space,
It's fair.
100%. And if this was Madden, yes. To pay two 30-year-old linebackers. And when I saw that Josina Anderson tweet saying, I want my money, that's when I kind of crossed KJ off the list. I think if he wants $10 million a year, I don't think that's smart.
Just to be clear, I agree with Jeff. I think that you miss KJ Wright the most out of that list.
Yeah.
Whether or not that means you should sign him for what he wants to be paid is a totally different question.
Well, and that depends on that dollar amount, doesn't it? I mean, that really does. I got into it with someone on Twitter. They're like, "Oh, he'll take the hometown discount and it'll be fine." I said, no one is going to.
I think a lot of people thought a 30-year-old linebacker who's in his third contract won't cost that much.
Yeah.
No,
not the way he's played this year.
I think he played too well. Honestly, I think he played his way out of Seattle.
I think you might be right. Nathan, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think higher on Quill than I think most folks are here at this point. So I do think that losing him would be a problem, but he's kind of in the same boat as KJ for me. Like I think he's likely to get paid more than he's worth or more than you want to pay him. Mayoa though is an interesting one that I think that I hope they can bring back. Like he's not the most important guy on this list, but I thought he started playing quite a bit better. And he is someone that maybe can come back at a pretty good price again. So if I'm like, who do I really kind of want to see come back out of that list? I think it might be Mayoa.
That's a good call.
Definitely. And did someone say that Bruce Irvin had to have another surgery? Did I read that? Oh, God, that breaks my heart. He was so jacked to come back. I don't know. That's the emotional man. Broke my heart. But all right, Evan, what about you?
So same answer as Jeff and Brian. Really, there's nobody that I look at on this list and say, they absolutely need to re-sign this player. And that's why I'm really not too worried about their cap situation. They have money. They have 18 million right now projected with like a 177 cap or something like that.
Higher.
Yeah, there's a lot of rumors and talk that's going to be 190 or higher. So do the simple math. We're talking 30 million right off the bat. And if you want to cut Jaron Reed, it's an extra 9 million in year one cap savings. So they have the space to, pull the trigger on an outside move if they want to, but internally looking, the only other sort of value play I could see them going, and you guys might balk at this, but I think Mike Upati is an interesting candidate for re-signing. I know he struggled towards the end of the year, but he started off really well. He had a good stretch of games. And I just want to keep the offensive line together as much as possible. I understand, they declined as the season went on, but he's an absolutely capable starter and a really good backup if that's what his role was to be. So from a value perspective, I think Mike Upati could be an interesting one, but like outside of those, like maybe you throw another like vet minimum dart at Philip Dorsett and see if, he could play next year and what that would change the offense and look like. But outside of that, these guys aren't deal breakers. They're really not.
Yeah. On Upati, I'll be shocked if he doesn't retire. He was dealing with stingers the whole second half of the year. I don't think he's able to play anymore. But I think there's some names you didn't mention, or maybe I didn't hear it. So like Philip Dorsett, Nick Bellore, David Moore, Delano Hill, Chris Carson. Did you say Chris Carson? I think you did. Maybe you didn't. So there's just Cedric Abwehi. It's another name. Jacob Hollister. So
I skipped over the worthless. I'm just kidding.
Talking about bringing back Philip Dorsett. I mean, maybe we'll talk about it maybe in terms of who's available out there, but I feel like there's some pretty intriguing options that would make me more interested than Philip Dorsett.
But he's a guy, Brian, though, that like you pay on a vet minimum deal, and if he's shit in camp, you just cut him.
I was surprised though, because wasn't there some rumblings early in the year after Dorsett got hurt that Dorsett had maybe not been on the up and up with them about his injury situation? So I was surprised when Pete was mentioned that maybe they get him back, or because he did call that out, right?
Elaborate, please, because this is new.
No, he said, so I'll tell you, I mean, specifically what happened was in one of Pete's pressers talking about Philip Dorsett prior to the announcement of the injury, when he started missing practices in training camp, Pete said, yep, apparently he had a foot issue we weren't aware of. And it was almost those exact words. And, and then all this happened. And I had said in these shows before Pete had said that, I was like, when he's been asked about Philip Dorsett, his tone has changed the last week or two. He was like super praisey and positive, and then it wasn't that he was even disappointed. He sounded annoyed. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I thought it was pretty clear that he seemed pretty upset about it. But Nathan, you're right. I mean, either Pete's just lying again. He said Shotty was going to be back too. So who knows?
Yeah. So I think my answer to this question would have to be completely counterbalanced with who is available out in the world compared to what we have. If there's a ton of cornerbacks out there that could be had at a decent price that are good, then maybe the money that Shaquille Griffin would need to stay isn't worth it because we can get someone else at that position, or the same in the linebacker situation. I think that you have to balance that a little bit with what else is out there and how realistic is it that you can get them, because fans aren't always realistic. So let's talk about who else is available. Let's talk about free agents from other teams coming out this year that intrigue you, that fit a position you think Seattle needs and might be able to be had. I don't know if anyone wants to list off a bunch, or if you just kick off. Yes, I know you're so excited. Please.
I'm so dying. So I got one. I've got a bunch, but I'm just going to say one that I think would be. I mean, David Moore, goodbye. Philip Dorsett, goodbye. Hello, John Ross. 26 years old, will not make almost any money. Tell me that this offense would not love having John Ross on it.
Keep going, Brian. I'm almost there. I'm almost there, Brian.
I mean, there's a bunch of receiver names. There really are. I mean,
he really is only 25. He's 25.
26.
He won't be 26 till November.
Yeah. So
that's crazy.
He to me, come home, dude. Let's do it. Make that happen. I would so much rather watch him play than Philip Dorsett. So
that's saying something coming from a Ducks fan.
I'm not a Ducks fan.
All right, name off some others to get you excited, Brian.
Well, I'll just say some other receivers since I'll start there.
Okay.
AJ Green. AJ Green is 33. I don't know what he's going to make on the open market. I don't know what he's going to look for. If he's looking to play for a contender with a good quarterback, and the Seahawks there's been some rumors of interest in the past, sign me up for that. I'd take him. I think there's some other, I don't know what Sammy Watkins will probably be priced out of what they'd be willing to pay, but he's also a really interesting fit in terms of, catching the deep ball. I think Corey Davis from Tennessee, he'll probably he's too young and has upside, so he'll probably get too much money, but he's 6'3". He's interesting to me. Even guys like Kendrick Bourne from San Francisco, I think he's better than David Moore. So I could keep going, but those are. It is crazy to me that Juju Smith-Schuster makes $1 million. Talk about good deals.
Everyone says he's done in Pittsburgh. Come, yeah. Juju, come.
So those are a couple names on the receiver front, but man, I love getting the young guys that are undervalued that have high upside, and John Ross just fits that to a T.
Awesome.
You know who is a free agent? Von Miller.
Yeah, just plug him in, dude.
Clowney is too.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, no.
I
No.
mean, pick it by position.
No Clowney talk this year at all. Banned.
Why not?
Forbidden.
Why?
I would consider bringing back Clowney
Why
Oh, for
not?
Christ's sake.
at a depressed cost.
Nope.
Why? Why, Dayna?
Because he can't stay on the damn field. He's proven it every single season, and he won't come back at a depressed cost. He still thinks he's God's gift to the planet. So therefore, he's going to want a ridiculous amount of money, and then he'll hold out. And if he doesn't get what he wants, he'll pout on the sidelines and not play. Well, no, move on. We have other people.
Love
That's
it,
my
Dayna. Fire.
Sorry.
Damn, I don't know how to respond to that.
Clowney is in shambles somewhere, crying in a corner.
No, he's not. He's like, who's that
Dayna,
chick? Who cares?
that to me.
Oh my gosh.
You were kind of asking this, Dayna, but I'm kind of curious just generally. Even like we can get into all that we could spend 3
There's
hours
so
on
many,
free
yeah.
agents.
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious where folks like positionally where you want to prioritize, because the obvious thing might be, hey, well, we were losing Shaquille Griffin and Quentin Dunbar. We need to get a corner. So let's I almost wonder, like, is anyone like, hey, we should prioritize offensive line? Like, Brandon Shell, we freaked out about him. He's not even that good. He's like a mediocre right tackle, which was a huge upgrade over Jermaine Ifedi. But like, what does that mean if you get, like, do you go for Corey Linsley? Like, do you put a lot of money into
my answer? That was my
Sure.
answer.
like get a, like, I'm kind of curious just positionally if people are like where you guys are at, where you would want them to spend their money.
Right there. You got to play Aaron Donald twice a year. And you have left guard and center where Ethan Posic's a free agent. Mike Upati might retire. If you can stabilize one of those spots with a high-priced free agent, to me, that's a huge deal. Because without a first-round pick, without a third-round pick, doesn't leave you much room in the draft. I'm more of a drafted receiver kind of guy than sign one in free agency. I think they still screwed up last year, even though I don't think it would have changed much this year. I think Brian, you've talked about hitting the strength of classes. I think they really screwed up by not doing that last year. For me, a veteran spot is tight end. I think Greg Olsen was a whiff. Will Dissly was not the same player this year. And we talk about Russell middle of the field. He's not a free agent, but Zach Ertz is a guy that I think they could trade for.
I don't think he'll be back in Philly. I think
whoa,
you're
Philly
Whoa.
has
You're forgetting about Jacob Hollister, buddy.
Free agent.
I know.
They
You
need.
should re-sign him. His
I
favorite
think
player.
they need to have a middle of the field option for Russell, whether that's a receiver, because DK and Lockett, they have their strengths. They're more boundary players. They don't have that middle of the field weapon. It became this year too many shots to Dissly and Hollister, and they are what they are. So I think tight end is a spot where they need something better there, because I think that would help unlock a part of Russell's game that's lacking.
What about corner?
Wait. Before you go offensive line, I'm kind of just curious. Would you guys rather like they paid like a guy like Mike Pouncey, who's 32 and but has quality, or re-sign a guy like Ethan Posick and for cheaper, like, and just or are you thinking you want to go for top of the line like Corey Linsley money?
I'd want to go top of the line on offensive line. I think that's
Even
the one
if it
place
means
to
you
really
get a receiver.
I don't know, you look
It's tough.
at New Orleans, you look at Green Bay, look at who their receivers are. They're not, they have one guy and then a bunch of filler. They have great centers, great offensive lines. And I think that's more important.
Well, especially because Russell is the most sacked quarterback in league, or right at the
You
top.
got to play Aaron
again.
Donald. You got to play Bosa and Kinlaw.
Oh, Bosa's going to come back.
You need good. Like, you got to put Aaron Donald just going to wreck, and to have Posick back, I think that would be pretty discouraging.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think that if you're gonna splurge somewhere, I think offensive line makes sense. I mean, I think they need to invest at wide receiver. I think that they should probably grab a tight end. We can talk about cornerback and some other spots too, but yeah, I mean, because I think Brandon Scherf's a free agent, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Corey Linsley. So there's what's that?
Jermaine Ifedi, he's a free agent.
Sure. Yeah. He had like 2 good games where he was rated really well by PFF, right? Yeah. So I think that's where I think if I had to pick one, there are some receivers that are pretty interesting to me, but I think ultimately, yeah, I mean, with Aaron Donald and all that, I think you prioritize the line.
I'm going to be honest, guys. We need to dedicate like an entire show to free agency or
for
free
sure.
agents in general.
Yeah.
Mhm.
No
Yeah.
doubt.
I agree for sure. So I guess if I had to pick one, I would pick the line too. I think what's interesting is that I know that you can draft a wide receiver, you can, go out and find it, but when you need one that fits a specific need, Seattle has 2 very specific wide receivers. They need a very specific kind of third wide receiver to balance it out. Then you might want to go in, look at the young guys who are out there available in the league and see who fits that. Whether you trust the Seahawks evaluation of them or not, but to see if they've kind of fit that. I think that that's true. I think that what I'm hearing anyway from most of you guys is that we all pretty much agree that the defense is pretty good. Cornerback's a question for sure. We'll have to get that filled in, that sort of thing. But for the most part, pretty settled there. They just need to look at that offense just a little bit more. I agree there. All right. Let's move on. I want to talk about, you guys said that sometimes you guys talk about your favorite game. I'm afraid though that you guys are going to say you don't have one.
I have one.
Do you have one? What's your favorite game, Jeff?
Week 1.
That was mine too. I
Week
loved
1 was
week
so
one.
good.
It
Like
was so good.
They flipped the offense. They were winning comfortably the whole time. Jamal Adams had an incredible game. I was just riding a high like that. That wasn't one of those games where the defense blew it like the next couple. Everything was good about that game. Like, yeah, they gave up a shitload of yards, but it didn't matter.
Matt Ryan threw for over 400 yards that day.
Yeah, like, it didn't really matter. We never worried they were going to blow the game like New England or Dallas.
Right.
That
Full
game
touchdowns
was like
Russell. Yeah, that was my favorite too. I was going back looking over them again when I was getting up.
That game was awesome.
So fun. Look, everyone else just looks sad. It's just me and you, Jess.
You know what game actually ended up being really impressive in hindsight was that Dolphins game in Miami. That, in hindsight, looking at that schedule, it might be their most
like a slog. Yeah,
it might be their most impressive win.
Mm-hmm. They beat everyone else in the NFC West.
I liked the first 49ers game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
they won by 10.
That's
when they won by 10, right? Yeah.
They were up like
31-0 or something.
30-3 going into the fourth quarter or something. They just were they like ended Garoppolo's season and almost ended Kittle's season, and like, not that I hurt him and I was happy about that, but they were just like, Bobby had like 3 sacks and was like, they just dominated. That was fun. I always like beating the 49ers, which we swept this year.
Yeah, I mean, those first 3 games were super fun. The Patriots game was really fun. The Cowboys game was really fun. But I think, yeah, you guys are right that the Falcons won because it was complete. Adams looked amazing in that game. So that was cool. I mean, it wasn't like the funnest game maybe, but the second Rams game was pretty great. Shutting down that team, getting a win against that team finally, doing it pretty convincingly, even if it didn't like look super pretty all the time. That was a really good game too.
Awesome. For sure. Okay. Yeah, the first game of the year. I was so excited about the rest of the season after that game. It was so fun. All right. So now this is kind of a 2-part one, and we can, I know that we're at our hour, so we have to kind of watch time just a little bit, but I want to know from you guys to kind of thinking back over the season. And what was the one factor, quote unquote, that either good or bad, that kind of summed up this season? Like, what was it that kind of got you to your peace with the season or still has you upset about the season? And I know it's real obvious to say, oh, the offensive decline, but a little more specific than that. What was it that was the either good or bad, either however, I'm letting you guys spin it either way that you want to, that was kind of it for the whole season for you guys? And let me give you a little example of what I meant so you guys can think about this for just a little bit. So for me, the factor of this season, the one thing that just sits in my head about this entire season is the resurgence of the defense. Even though they had some pretty big injuries, even though, like Bruce Everett was out immediately, even though he looked good in the first couple of games. There was just a lot of question marks that surrounded it. And the fact that they just fought that fight for me that I saw out of them was just so encouraging and so good after how bad they had been. So that's what sits in my head. Pollyanna, yes. But that's what sits in my head about this entire season. It's not about Russ and him having a bad season and the offense getting off kilter. And we knew that, they were changing it up anyway. It was really that just deep down fight from the gut that we really saw come out of the defense. So that's kind of what I mean by the one factor. So
I think that's a good one, Dayna. My description of this season, like my takeaway is like, this was a season of priors. Like, people got their priors confirmed on let Russ cook at the beginning, and then people that were like, and then people had to eat it about being wrong on that, and then people that were saying that was the great solution saw it not work in the second half, and all those people that thought Russ sucked got their priors confirmed, and then people that said that Pete wasn't going to be able to, let someone else run the offense. Like basically, like, everybody, no matter what side of the various debates you were on, you were both right and totally wrong this season at some point. True. Like there's no one that can say that they got this right this year, because everybody was wrong, like horribly wrong at least some point of this season in what they believe to be true. And I don't like that in some ways, but in other ways I'm kind of like, hey, that keeps our open minds. Maybe we'll learn something new next year.
All right, Nathan, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, mine's not a positive one. I'm gonna remember that Washington game, I think, a lot. That for me is kind of a microcosm of this team now. Like, where the defense was resurgent, but it was against a quarterback that got cut a week later. The offense did enough, but it looked completely lost for the most part. And it was just in the middle of that stretch where, all that was going on. And to me, that was where I kind of jumped off the like, this team can have a chance to be a serious contender. So that was kind of where I lost hope a little bit about what this team could really be. So for me, that's the thing that sticks in my head. And on the post-game show, talking about, is this team just going to be the Portland Blazers, or the Blazers, or the Grizzlies, or the whatever, your example of a team that consistently wins a lot of regular season games or makes the playoffs, but doesn't really ever seem to make a real run, at a championship. And so, I think that's what's left kind of rattling around in my head right now.
Okay. How about you, Jeff?
Mine's pretty similar to Nathan, and mine is the Giants game. I think the Giants game is a perfect microcosm of kind of what happened here. And just things should have been so much better. That game, number one, cost them the number one seed, cost them the first round bye. We're not even playing last week. If they go out and have a bye and lose the whole season, it looks a little different. The fact that they couldn't beat Colt McCoy with that kind of talent. Oh, no.
Oh, Lord.
Oh,
no!
Whoa.
Oh, my God. You people are horrible.
Yeah, I knew Andre would come through for us. That's awesome.
Oh,
it's happening.
Evan.
Evan, that's terrible.
At least I'm smiling. God.
That why he left?
It's actually perfect that it goes from the Evan sad face to the happy.
That's why he bailed. He knew this was coming.
Sorry, Jeff. I had to do it.
That's hilarious.
No, that was much better than my answer. Mine was depressing. So, yeah, it was just the Giants game. The offense couldn't figure out how to attack a defense. The playoff offense looked so similar to that game where they just felt like they were banging their head against the wall. And it was such a strange year of extremes where their offense and defense just totally flipped. But that Giants game just rings everything that went wrong. And honestly, I had said it before the playoff game. I said it was Schotty's most important game of his career. He was going up against Brandon Staley. Everyone was watching. Brandon Staley has 5 interviews and Shoddy got fired. So
Really
that Giants game was kind of the start of that whole thing.
It's a really good point. This question scared Evan so much because he couldn't have answered it that he decided to go. No, Evan had to leave us. So it's just the 4 of us now. All right. So I think we have some Patreon questions, if I'm correct. Is that right?
I think you're on mute there, Nathan.
You are correct. Yes.
I was like, no, I'm not.
Although you asked right as I had pulled it. Okay, so since it asked who is your season MVP, I think it might be good too if we want to just run through, like, do we want to talk about who, like, do we want to do like offensive player of the year, defensive player of the year? I guess we did that a little bit right in favorites. So let's just get everybody's MVP. Brian, do you want to start?
MVP overall. Dwayne Brown.
Jeff?
I'm going to go DK Metcalf.
Dayna?
I'm going to go Carlos Dunlap.
Yeah, I'll go Dunlap too. Sure. He had I think that was a big turn in the season, right? Okay. And then Jonathan Taylor asked, does firing Shoddy actually change anything as long as Pete's still the head coach? I think that one, everyone is on the same page, right? Pete's still dictating what this offense should look like. So I think ultimately no, right? All right, Savage TV. Brian, for you, do you believe we should invest into finding a new defensive tackle and trade Jarran Reed?
Well, the last part of it throws me a bit. I don't assume that there's a trade market for Jarran Reed at $13.5 million on the cap for this coming season. So I think if you're asking, should they cut him and recoup that money and spend it elsewhere? Sure. I mean, I think it really depends. There's no way that Jarran Reed should be $13.5 million on your cap next year. Either you need to extend him and lower that hit, which I'd be okay with. I don't think he's as bad as everybody on a lot of people on this show think he is. But I'd be fine. I haven't really looked at the defensive line free agents pool to see if there's a realistic player that they could add there. But generally speaking, I think they should keep Jarran Reed and try to just lower his cap hit.
And can I add to that really quick? There has been a lot of chatter between a lot of people who understand the cap way better than I do, that there will probably be a lot of reshuffling, extensions, redoing contracts, changing things into signing bonuses just to help out this next year. The word on the street is that there'll probably be a lot of that from a lot of teams with kind of those bigger hit players.
Yeah, I'm kind of laughing. I see this on Twitter all the time. Like, the Seahawks have $5 million of real cap space. They're screwed. Like, it's so laughable. It's such fear-mongering crap. It's so easy to create cap room. Brian mentioned a list of players that they can extend. And for people who don't know, extensions a lot of the times will lower the first-year cap hit. So there's guys like Dunlap, Reed, Dwayne Brown, Jamal Adams, that they could potentially lower all those cap numbers. But as Dayna said, there's going to be a lot of funny money moving around because once fans start coming back in the building, the cap is going to skyrocket very quickly again. So a lot of money is just going to get pushed forward. And some numbers that look high now in a month are not going to look completely different because you're going to be borrowing from the future to get through this season. So looking at what the current cap is and the current numbers is almost a stupid exercise because it's easy to just – there's projections that by 2022 or 2023, the cap could be like 220 million. So if you push the money forward and it just kind of moves up like that, it's to worry about that now is a little silly.
Okay. Kind of along the same lines here. So Sam Brown and Amani Waddle have questions about list of notable Seahawks you're okay to part with, or do you have a surprise player that you would like to trade away this offseason? We talked a little bit about who we're okay leaving. So Jeff, do you have anyone that I think Brian's right about the trade value with Reed. Is there someone here that on the team that you would think would be valuable and also wouldn't, hurt the team too much to lose? or Dayna, if you have an idea
I
either.
can't think of a name. I think they don't have a lot of guys who would generate trade interest unless they flip Jamal again. But
Biggest name has to be Tyler Lockett.
That's what I was thinking. That's the
do
only
you really
one that
take a
comes to
receiver
mind.
out of this offense?
No, I don't think they should do it, but I think that's who would garner interest. I
Yeah.
think that of any of our players, because they know they're not getting rid of DK, they know they're not getting rid of Bobby. I mean, any of the bigger guys, Tyler might be the carrot for some, and that scares the crap out of me because I think Tyler is he's tailor-made.
Wait a second.
No, you're okay to get rid of him?
Russell Wilson.
Hell no, stop it. Oh my God.
Again, Watson?
Stop it. Just
Well, okay, so hold on. So there is one other quarterback that we're not talking a lot about. So we've talked about Watson, right? And I think we all agree that, you know,
Talking about Magoo. Come on, dude.
yeah, I mean, they have the solution in the building. Fire Pete if you can't figure this out. Just no. Okay, so we've talked about Watson, and I think we all agree that you're not going to do a straight Wilson for Watson swap. You're going to have to throw in something, and maybe as much as 2 first-round picks along with Russ to get Watson. There is a quarterback who is freely available that you just need to pay money to.
Ryan Fitzpatrick?
Huh? Dak
Ryan
Prescott.
Fitzpatrick? No, they're going to tag
I don't
him.
think he'll be freely available.
They're going to tag him.
Yeah, they're going to
Think?
tag him.
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I in addition to Russ, though, I think Bobby is still a valuable player to trade. And I do think he's still declining. I think he's getting a little bit of the all-pro love just because of inertia. Not to say that he's not still been very good, but I don't think he's the same quality of player he was, 3-4 years ago. So I think those are the 3: Lockett, Wagner, and they're maybe best equipped to replace Wagner of all those guys.
So I'll go off the cliff just for conversation here and say, I think you have a more realistic chance of improving the position by trading Russ than by trading Tyler. Like, I think trading Tyler, I'm not sure that I see where you're going to actually plug in a player of Tyler's quality or better by getting rid of him. There is a potential, like Dayna hates this conversation. I get it. A lot of people do. I think Deshaun Watson being a younger player and some of the things that have come out about limitations of where Russell was able to throw the ball and not able to throw the ball, and things that he does well and things that he doesn't. I think if Deshaun Watson's really available and if you can trade Russ for Watson and not have him go to a team like San Francisco or something like that, I don't think it's like the worst idea that I've ever heard. I've been generally against it because I think that Russ is more durable than Watson, and Watson has a little bit of RG3 in him in terms of how he runs the ball and takes hits that doesn't need to. But dude's a fantastic quarterback. So I don't think it's the worst idea in the world.
Is there anyone else that could be worth trading Russell for in like a hypothetical crazy scenario?
Can you flip in Jacksonville and get the number 1 pick and get Trevor Lawrence?
But would you want to?
I don't know.
I feel like if you get an unknown rookie for an established franchise quarterback, I don't know about that.
Well, I think in that scenario, you're getting more coming back along with the pick, right? In the Watson scenario, you're giving up stuff with Russ to get Watson. I think in basically any other scenario that we could talk about, you're getting more than just a first round pick, right? You're getting a couple firsts or something like that, something interesting. So from that perspective, it would maybe be like the number 1 overall pick and maybe a second first round pick or something like that, right?
The chat is actually is really having some opinions on this conversation, by the way.
I think it's ludicrous.
Sides.
And I mean, nobody here thinks they're doing anything with Russ, right? Russ is coming.
We should probably talk about that press conference today.
Yeah. So you listened to it, right, Jeff? Well, hold on. Let me scan real quick for any other Patreon questions. Yeah. Oh, so the only other thing on the Patreon questions, John asked, Braxton asked, John said, what in the world killed Russell's magic this year? Seriously, how do you go from 5 touchdowns a game to 2 picks and struggling to win every game? Braxton asking, Seahawks opponents played a lot of two deep safety, which is maybe a little overblown, but anyways, what does the offense need to do to schematically counter this? I think if any of us had the answers to those questions, that nobody would be asking those questions. They would be solved, right? So I don't know if anyone wants to chime in on ideas about Russ, about the too high stuff, but I think really it's a mystery that only time is really going to answer for us.
And isn't that's the whole point? So I keep saying, listen to people watching, we got in the biggest fight on our chat about this. So that's why he said, I hate this conversation, because I do. But here's the thing. Russell Wilson, 9th year in the season, steady, consistent, always good. You cannot tell me in that wild card game, you still didn't expect him to win it in the fourth quarter, in the last few minutes. He had that. Okay, I disagree with you guys, because I guarantee you that you would not have been surprised if they had figured out how to win that game. So here's the thing. He had a bad half a season for the first time in his career. Now, granted, when he was a rookie, that was a rookie thing. So we can't really, we know that there were some issues there. And you guys have to understand, I'm defending quarterbacks. That does not happen in my world. And so that's why this flips me out so much. But here's the thing with that. I think that we cannot hold this half a season as a complete indictment of who Russell Wilson is going to be in the future. I think that we all have to wait and see what happens with a new coordinator, with a new plan, and as much as Nathan hates to hear it, fixing that run game a little bit. I know it was super efficient, whatever. Let's not get into that. But, and seeing how that works. If we have another full year of Russell Wilson playing like he did in the last couple of games in this season, that's a different conversation. But the fact that you guys would be okay with getting rid of someone who's been more consistent for this team than any other player because of a half of a season of questionable play where the OC got fired at the end of the season, I think that's a huge jump. I think time will only tell if he's broken or if it was situational.
I don't think he's broken.
All I'm going to say on it.
I'm glad you did. I just want to clarify. I don't think Russ is broken. I also don't think it's accurate to say, oh, this was just a half a season. Russ, I went back. I did it today. I actually went through every single one of his games he's ever played and broke down by season. And every season he's had a
couple of games.
He's not just a couple. Last year, he went like 6-7 games toward the end of the season. It was basically 7 games, 6 out of 7 games where he was not good. And
they lost 3 running backs in the course of 1 game. I mean, it's
Dayna.
I know. Shut up, Nathan. I know.
Running
backs don't matter.
2017, he had a bunch of games that were like this. 2016, I mean, that was that was the 1 touchdown, 5 interception game in Green Bay that 2 weeks earlier he had a 38.8 rating against Carolina. Like, even his 2013 season, the last month of that season, he was shit. So he is pretty much every single season, he has gone through a stretch where he has not been a good quarterback. And it was only in this year where I think it was the longest stretch, where it was just like, okay, when are you just going to snap out of it? And he never did. All the way. I mean, we talked about it, Dayna, even heading into the playoffs. Is like, just see him be Russ again, and then this team can take off. And it never happened. And so I don't think he's broken, but I do think it's a concern. And I do think that this was the first season that they've truly, truly put the team on his shoulders. They passed the ball a lot and they put it in his hands to win games, like from the beginning. And he wasn't able to sustain that for the season. He wasn't able to shoulder that load. So I think that it's fair to say, well, maybe that's not who he is as a quarterback. I'm not saying that's true. I'm not coming down and like being some hot take guy on it, but he has not yet had a season where he deserves an MVP, a true MVP consideration. And that's the kind of player that we all think he should be. So this was the year that it should have been. It definitely wasn't. So I think it's super fair to criticize Russell. In fact, I think it's crazy to me how much criticism Pete gets and how little criticism Russell gets. Like, I see those two as like linked at the hip. And it was not Pete this year that kept Russell from throwing the ball. He had every chance. So now it's Shoddy's fault, and now Shoddy's gone. How many different offensive coordinators are going to have to go through? He had a good offensive line this year. How many of those sacks did Russell run into versus, bad pressure? So like, I don't know. I just think he's your franchise quarterback. He wants to be the best that ever played. What comes along with that is expectations and scrutiny. And he wasn't good enough this year. So if you're telling me we're going to reload, I care about this franchise more than I do about any player or any coach, any owner. And if it means moving on from him and gives us a better chance over the next 5-10 years of winning a Super Bowl, so be it. I mean, I'd be sad about it, but I want them to win again. So I just wanted to clarify that was.
Yeah. And for me, I bring up this Deshaun Watson conversation a lot. Let me preface it with this. It is a ridiculous hypothetical sports radio kind of conversation. Like the chances of that happening are under 1%. So when I'm saying I want Watson for Wilson, like that's just like arguing nonsense. It's not going to happen. But what Brian said is absolutely right. I think there are a lot of questions about Russell, and I thought there were some couple of really good articles that went around. One guy I think his name's Ben Solak. He wrote a really good story on how Shoddy did nothing wrong. And a lot of fans were filling my timeline the other day saying this is all Shoddy's fault. And sure, there are some issues with Shoddy, but watch and see Mike Spin 22. I forget his name right now. Griffin.
See Mike Spin Move.
Yes. Great Twitter guy. Has fantastic clips. He knows he's basically Maddie without the arrogance. He has some great stuff on stuff Shoddy does well. And you saw Russell's limitations this year. And I think Nathan sent us a video of Drew Brees crushing like middle of the field throws. And if you watch Russell's great in the vertical game. He's great at certain things, but the middle of the field, and I thought Doug Baldwin's tweet during the playoff game was kind of hinting at this, that when DK Metcalf flipped out and they blamed, I think they blamed the offense. He blamed something else. He blamed Jalen Ramsey, and Doug was like, that's not who he's talking about. So I think the more Russell got some volume this year, you saw some of the limitations and some of the concerns like the Greg Cosell's of the world have had, where there are questions whether – I know the best way to run an offense is like Nathan and Derek are great at explaining the most efficient way to run an offense. In general, in the NFL, passing is more efficient than running. And I'm not saying running more is the solution. But I think the question now for the Seahawks is not what's the most efficient way to score points. It's what's the most efficient way for Russell. And I don't think that's necessarily running more. I think that's the biggest question. How does the offense make Russell in the best spot possible? I don't know if there's a clear answer to that. Because last year we all thought there was.
Yeah, I'm reading people's takes and some of this. Like the offense was fine until Pete stepped in. I'm like, Pete didn't step in until Russell had like 10 turnovers in 4 games. Like, I don't think, unless you think that that's fine. Like, I don't know. So
yeah, there was a lot of that going around. I don't think that's the issue. Like, him not seeing guys wide open in the middle of the field, why is that a coaching issue?
Yeah. I know that's not the conversation you wanted to have, Dayna. You're like, your blood is
criticize Russell, but
it's a conversation that needs to be had. I honestly, I think
the idea of trading him is ludicrous, but I think the idea of how does he get better and was he a part of what went wrong here? I think that's a conversation that people need. It's kind of the elephant in the room around the Seahawks right now.
I don't know that it is the elephant in the room. That's my whole point, is that you guys say we shouldn't trade Russell, but then we should trade Russell, but we shouldn't trade Russell, but then we should trade Russell. And I love hypotheticals. I get that. I think that that's really fun in football, and that's what the offseason is for.
You're always yelling at us.
Yeah, I yell all the time. But what I do think that something that you said, and this is what just it sits funny with me, is the fact that you're like, we can't figure out what the most efficient offense is. We have to figure out what, is most efficient for Russell. Well, isn't that the point? Isn't that the point? You have a franchise quarterback who has limitations. Every single one of them does. Every single one of them does. And so isn't that the point, is to work with the guy who's going to and make him the best that he can be? Yes, you could go trade him out, but if you're going to do that, you're going to be stuck like the Browns and have a list down a jersey of different quarterbacks because you're trying to make him do stuff that he can't do. And so I think that that's kind of the point. When you have someone who has the talent that Wilson has and the level that we have seen him play at, and of course he's aging. I get that. I totally accept that. And I have no problem criticizing quarterbacks, where the illogical part of it is that everyone wanted him to throw more. Everyone wants him to do this, that, or the other, but maybe that's not what works best for him. And if we're really talking about winning, that's what you have to figure out. If you're not going to trade him, if you're not going to get rid of him, then you have to figure out how to make him win.
But we got to be real. They're not trading him.
Exactly. It's not going to happen.
Any chance that they're going to trade him?
Yeah,
No,
when I say that, I'm saying
career.
that almost in like a mocking fashion. Like it's
right.
I was
agree
answering a
with you there.
Patreon question because we love our patrons. And I think that honestly, that's a better answer than Tyler Lockett. I think there's a better chance that you could improve your team trading Russell Wilson than there's a chance that you could improve your team trading Tyler Lockett. Do I think it's the right move to make? Probably not.
But neither's trading Tyler Lockett. So
yeah. That's kind of my point.
I get it. Okay. Is that all the questions?
That's it.
Okay, so let's wrap up with this last one. Okay, finish the season. We've set it to the side. We're moving on. So looking into, and this could be long answers, but I hope, I'm so sorry if you guys have to give long answers, but going down into the off season, more important to you, the draft or free agency? Because this year we know the draft is weird this year. We get that, there's not gonna be a combine. There's, they didn't really play all that much. It's a wacky, weird draft this year. We get that. So what is more important to this Seattle Seahawks team looking into the offseason, the draft or free agency? Who wants to go first?
I'll go. It's free agency. They have like 4 draft picks.
Yeah, but that won't stay that way. That's one of the.
Yeah, but it's not like they can move down from the first round. Like if you're moving down from the second round, you're getting a third and a sixth. Like those are not like the things that move big in the Jimmy Johnson trade charts. They're going to have like the 56th pick and then no pick to the 4th round. So
I will say they do well in those mid rounds.
They do. And it's very possible they hit on some stuff, but I don't think those are the kind of players you can realistically hope are going to push this team over the top.
Fair.
I think this team just needs tweaks. I think we've said it. The roster is not the problem. They have the skills, a tight end here, a third receiver, a cornerback. Mm-hmm. I think that's a far more realistic way. In a normal year, I'm always a draft guy. But with no first and no third, and I think to expect that is,
it's a weird year. What about you guys? Nathan?
I'm still inclined to say the draft, even though the opportunity there is a lot less like you guys are saying. I mean, it's still just an opportunity to get talented young players at a really cheap price, and so I still think that's the most important. But it's probably never been closer than it is this year.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
It's a weird year.
Yeah. I would normally agree with Nathan, not in general, but on this topic. But I think I'm going to answer free agency, not because of the players they could sign, but because they could make some really bad choices of who to keep. And so it's a really, really important year for them to not sign some of these players that basically all of us said, there's not a single one that you go to the mat and pay them whatever they need to keep them. And if they do that with one of these players and keep themselves from adding to the team elsewhere where they do need to spend some money, that's where there's a real risk. So last year they made my year by waiving Justin Britt. I did not think they were going to have the foresight to do that. They did it. Those are the kind of moves that can make a lot of things possible this offseason.
Mm-hmm. And to be honest with you, I don't know enough about the draft this year. I feel so disconnected from college ball, but is it like last year was all about the wide receivers, right? Like this year, I mean, the 2 quarterbacks, and really is there a position that sticks out like crazy that Seattle needs to go after? Not this year, right? Am I not wrong about that? It's like not this year.
Hard to say. Like the draft.
Running back.
Yeah, probably running
No,
back.
don't say that in front of Nathan.
Nathan would say if they use a late round or mid round pick on a running back so that they don't
just shook
spend
his head
money
no.
on one or an early round
In the
pick.
6th round.
Yeah.
But like,
No,
I would have drafted 23rd. A receiver would be great, but this team doesn't really do that.
Right.
It's a draft that like doesn't have a lot of like top end defensive talent. There's some quarterbacks, there's some interesting receivers that are going to go in the top 15. And then it's kind of like the quote I said to you, where if everyone from pick 15 to 60 is kind of the same.
Yep.
So, and it's going to be a lot of, and the way Seattle drafts, where they do all their research on grit and who's overcome stuff, and their picks are probably going to be pretty weird this year. So don't expect Seattle to get back to normal. It's going to be guys that when you Google them, you're going to have to look at the 5th round or something.
It's true. It's true. All right, guys. Well, that is our show for today. Thank you guys all for hanging out with us. If you haven't, hit the subscribe button or give us a thumbs up, please. That would be huge, and we'd be very thankful for that. Also, if you haven't, join our Patreon. We have a great time. That Slack channel is crazy. Like, those guys go off on the Slack channel. And there's some smart cookies over there. I just love reading through all of that. So, and there is a positive vibes only section for those of us who like that section a lot. So make sure you hit that up. It's patreon.com/hawkblogger, correct?
Patreon.com/hawkblogger.
Yep, absolutely. So check that out. I don't know how you guys work in the off season. Are we doing this again next week, or are we going to take a couple weeks off? I don't know. We'll let you know though, so keep track of it.
Subscribe and you'll find out when our
Absolutely.
next show is. We generally go to a little bit less frequent, but we will see folks pretty soon. The off season is one of my favorite parts. I like nothing can really, you can't lose in the off season in the same way.
Can't be disappointed.
Like there's a lot of possibility and hope. So I'm excited. Hopefully we'll see how things go in free agency. A lot of good stuff coming.
All right. Thanks everybody. Have a good night.